Hey everyone, Warsteel here. I just recently got the achievement for getting past Wave 30 on the Proving Grounds for Endless Tank, so I decided to do a couple videos just to highlight the talents and glyphs and gear that I use to get it, as well as the general strategy on how to do it. A couple overall tips for doing the Endless Waves for Proving Grounds for tanking is number one is that your DPS doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if you are pumping out like 10,000 DPS or if you are doing like 25,000. The important thing is you want to maximize your mitigation. So you want to be preventing as much incoming damage as possible. And as a warrior, you do that through various short cooldowns such as shield block and shield barrier. And then you also do it through your longer cooldowns such as demoralizing shout, shield wall, last stand, and enrage regeneration. Being able to get the most out of these cooldowns is going to ensure that you're able to go wave after wave and continue to progress and hopefully eventually get some of the higher achievements that are available. Um, the talents that I used for this, some of them are talents that I use pretty much all the time, whether I'm tanking in raids or heroics or doing endless waves. Some of them are specifically different, and I'll go over those. So I use double time. I pretty much use this anytime I'm doing PvE stuff, whether it's raids, heroics, or even the endless wave. The snap mobility I think is really good. Being able to charge twice is really powerful. So I prefer this over, say, Juggernaut. Enrage regeneration is pretty much the de facto choice for the healing talent tier. Basically, it instantly gives you 30% healing for 1 minute, doesn't use a global cooldown. You can even use it while stunned, which can come up in the endless waves. Hopefully you can avoid it, but sometimes you can't. So this, I think, is probably going to be the best one. Better than impending victory because the amount of healing per time is about the same, but these do take up global cooldowns. For the next tier, I use heavy repercussions for endless waves because you don't want to be using your rage for heroic strikes. In farm content like 5-man heroics, you can go ahead and use as many heroic strikes as you want. You're not going to be taking that much damage. But here, you need to be using your rage to mitigate damage, so you don't want to be using heroic strike unless you get an ultimatum proc. So that's why I don't recommend unyielding strikes. And sudden death, you're going to end up using your executes, global cooldowns on your executes, which you really don't want to do. And again, like I said, damage doesn't really matter that much. So you'd rather just use heavy repercussions. You're going to shield slam anyways. So just get a nice little passive damage buff to your shield slam. This is the important talent tree right here. Originally I was using Dragon Roar because I use Dragon Roar for PvE scenarios in raiding and in 5-mans, but for the purpose of endless waves, you really want to use Shockwave. Shockwave gives you a ton of control on a 20-second cooldown as long as you hit 3 or more mobs. Again, like I said, the damage doesn't matter, so since the damage doesn't matter, what we're concerned about is maintaining control of the mobs. And we can do that with Shockwave since we can hit like a large pack, keep them all stunned, and then 20 seconds later you're able to do it again, as opposed to having to wait a full minute for Dragon Roar. So yeah, Shockwave is definitely, I think, the talent of choice for this specific scenarios. For the level 75 talent tree, this one you either want to use Safeguard or Vigilance. I use Safeguard. It's on a shorter cooldown. You can intervene to the NPC to give yourself a little bit of mobility, pick up a mob that you might have missed. Vigilance is also good as well. The ability to pop it on the NPC and then refresh your taunt versus the mobs that reset aggro is not a bad thing. I just use Safeguard. It's one less button for me to push in this instance. I do use Vigilance in raid situations. You pop it on the other tank, give them a really nice cooldown, but for the purposes of this, I just go ahead and use Safeguard. The level 90 tree doesn't matter. Basically, just don't take Bladestorm. You don't want to be sitting there Bladestorming and missing shield slams and revenge procs and not, maximizing your use of shield barrier and shield block. If you're level 100 talent, you either want to take Ravager or Gladiator's Resolve. I take Gladiator's Resolve because it's a nice 5% just flat damage reduction increase. So again, one less button for me to push overall. Ravager is also very good though because it does give you another good defensive cooldown since it gives you a 30% increased parry chance for 11 seconds. So either one is, I think, fine for this. Again, this is the specific talents that I use to get to wave 30. For your glyphs, I use these. Glyph of Unending Rage is going to be the most important one. It lets you pool your rage. For example, if the wave is close to being done and you're only tanking one mob, you can sit there and let your rage pool while you get back to maximum health. And then when that mob dies, you're able to go to the next wave with, 120 rage as opposed to say 100 rage if you didn't have the glyph. I think the next important one is Glyph of Wind and Thunder. This makes your Thunderclap hit a little bit larger radius, which is good for picking up those groups of mobs. If you need to use Thunderclap to get Snap Threat on a group and get them off of your NPC. So I really like this glyph. Glyph of Cleave is kind of the generic good one to use when you're doing PvE encounters like raids. It's great, for example, on like twins, where you're able to constantly cleave the mobs. But in this case, it doesn't really matter that much since you're not heroic striking too much. So I would actually recommend using Bull Rush. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and change that right now. But I did use this glyph, so if you're not using Bull Rush, it's not that big of a deal. Enraged Speed probably also has some use as well, since you are enraged a lot, and having a little bit of mobility wouldn't be too bad. But I'm going to go ahead and swap it out and go ahead and use Bull Rush. I think these are probably 3 of the really strong glyphs for you to use in these encounters. And for gearing, your gearing is going to be pretty much the same as PvE. There's not really a special thing to consider, but you definitely want bonus armor. You don't want stam over bonus armor. So for example, even though I don't have either one of these trinkets, if you had either, like, say, Pole's Eye, which has a large chunk of bonus armor, I think it's over 300 for normal and obviously more for heroic and mythic, or like the Tectis tanking trinket, which just has a ton of stamina and a little bit of bonus armor and a little bit of versatility, I would recommend using Poles. You want straight up damage mitigation, not necessarily stamina. There's a little bit of magic damage in these waves, but the big thing that's going to end up killing you is the large amount of physical mobs, and the physical mobs do a lot of damage. So the more bonus armor you have, the better off you're going to be. The next stats that you want to prioritize are Mastery and Crit. And honestly, for me, those 2 stats are really close to each other, so it's not going to matter too much either way. Mastery obviously makes your block better, gives you better critical blocks. And then your crit gives you more parry chance, which is great versus hard-hitting mobs, since, stopping incoming damage is going to be very good. Just completely ignoring an attack that can hit for, like, say, 50,000 or more damage is going to be very powerful. Also, the fact that you crit more gives you more enrage procs, and the more times you get enraged, the more rage you get, which lets you use shield block and shield barrier more mitigation, all that kind of stuff. Versatility is okay. It gives you a little bit of damage reduction, but not a lot. Haste and multi-strike are not very good, so you kind of don't want to use those. Try and avoid those stats as much as you can. One other thing of note is that shield barrier, while it's not very strong in conventional PvE scenarios, it's very, very good in the endless wave scenarios. The reason is because of resolve. Because you take so much damage from these mobs, your shield barriers can start absorbing for 70,000 or more as long as they're 60 rage. So definitely I use shield barrier constantly in this environment. So it's your one of your big priority usages of rage for this cooldown. Shield block is also very important. You want to keep shield block up as much as you possibly can. So basically you can just cycle through it. Use it whenever you're, taking multiple mobs. It's very good versus the groups that have like a dozen or so of the very little mobs, because you're shaving off all the damage that they're doing to you. So shield block, shield barrier, those are very important. Like I said before, heroic strike, only use this when you get an ultimatum proc. You never ever want to use rage on this, because that is taking away from your mitigation. Also, the other important thing to consider is how you time your cooldowns. When to use, like, say, demoralizing shout, when to use shield wall, when to use your healing cooldowns, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that is going to be contingent on what monsters you're fighting, what the monsters are doing, all those sorts of things. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple waves, show you guys how I progress through each of the waves, and then we'll go from there. Thanks for watching.